when do we sync our audio? Do we clap? Do we just yell? Do I go ah?
We'll roll a d20. No.
Okay, I have one next to me. Hold on. Give me a second.
We'll just.
Hey, wait, hold on. Want to hear this? Here's my dice bag. I'm gonna
You
drop
roll
my
all of
dice
them?
bag.
All of them on your
my
desk?
dice bag on my desk. Hold on.
I want to see at least 40.
All right, hold on. I'm gonna hear. Oh, this is gonna be so long to pick up. Hold on a second. Okay, where are all the fucking d20s? I got a 9, a 13. Oh no,
That's gonna be the intro. It's the cold open. I think we're just starting. I think we're just starting now. We're just gonna sync on to that.
Dice bag ASMR.
So hello everyone. Welcome to Bolters and Banter. I'm joined with Nick, who is my co-host. Hunter is not here because he has to do homework again.
Imagine being
Nick
in school.
is imagine working at a school.
Okay, listen. You don't have to call me out like
you
this.
You have to go to school like you're or is you're homeless?
Oh, tomorrow's the last review day before exams, and I'm gonna have so many questions.
Anyways, so I'm Tyler. I'm the main host of this show. Nick here is my co-host. If you are new to the channel, we go over basically just a bunch of different Warhammer stuff. We're trying to focus on new stuff, or stuff to get people into the hobby. We do a little bit of fun videos here and there too. Nick is an orc player. Nick, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey, the reason why you heard so many dice clacking is because that's what I need to play this game. Hi, I'm Nick. Long-time orc player. Well, I say long time, not in the scale of 40K's lifetime. I think I've been playing and painting for about maybe 3 years now, something like that.
Old.
Okay, listen, that's not actually that old. I know boomers who have.
How old are you, Nick?
NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Hello, put me on blast in front of the internet. Anyway, I like to think of myself as someone who likes to encourage people to get into the hobby, not exactly as like a hobby ambassador, but whenever I see another person get into orcs, I like to hype them up and see what kind of cool shit they're doing. And honestly, I'm just happy to contribute like virtually and digitally to getting new people into this beautiful world of just plastic cocaine.
Plastic crack, exactly. And I'm Tyler. I've been in the Warhammer for a little bit over a year now, I think. I am a guard player. I have not won a single game of Warhammer 40,000. That is a true fact.
That was me for 6 months. I get it.
Well, I haven't. I've only played a couple games, in all fairness, though, and nothing with like a full balance. Oh, I planned out this army, and that is a good segue into the topic of today's video, which is army building.
Yeah, Dean came in absolutely rolling in with that segue.
Dean came in.
Shit.
We are gonna steal that from Adric. I didn't want to say it, but
it's so funny.
It's so funny. I love Bricky.
Yeah, so Dean came in was the inventor of the Segway. He sold it to I think it was some German guy, and then left. And then like 6 months after purchasing the rights to Segway, the German guy who bought the company drove a Segway off a cliff. It's incredible.
Speaking of segues, we're gonna segue back into army building. So if you're getting into Warhammer 40,000, one of the biggest parts about it is obviously your army. Excuse me, I had just ate ice cream. I had to burp. Now, if you're really too new to the hobby, you don't have any models yet. I know it can be really overwhelming to figure out, what you're gonna get, how much you need. It's just daunting. If you're playing like Space Marines or something, you have a billion things to choose from. If you're playing, Eldari or Votann, if you're playing Votann, you don't even have to watch this video.
It's good, one of everything. And then here's the thing.
Get like two
Voton,
of
even though
everything,
they,
because one of everything wouldn't even be enough.
yeah, it's true, but also I don't know if you're gonna be able to afford it. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that too.
Oh, yeah, and I do find that people who are big lore heads, people who have the vision of what each faction is in their brain, it's a little bit easier for them to find armies. But if you're getting into the hobby for the wargaming aspect of, hey, I want to try a tabletop wargame, and Warhammer 40,000 is the most popular in my area, and honestly, no matter what city I've been to, there's always some Warhammer
There
40,000
always
players.
is.
Then you're
Um,
like, oh, I want to get an army to play this game, but I have no idea where to start. There's some like bugs over there, and then there's some like humans and like big humans, but the big humans you can't play at the
and I
same
have
time
other
as the little
humans that
humans.
have robot arms.
Yeah, I don't know, and like those nuns are making me feel some way, and I'm scared.
What do you mean by that, Nick?
So let's talk
Anyways,
about the basic rules from the core rules.
real quick before we get into that, we're gonna just
Yeah.
kind of go over what we're gonna cover in this video. So this is no matter what you're trying to get out of your army, we're kind of gonna go over it. We're not. This video is not gonna be about like building a meta list. It's not gonna be like, oh, you have to have these models or some shit like that. It's gonna be which way you want to go. Do you want to, whether you just want to go with something fun, thematic, but still holds up enough to where you can have fun playing and you're not just being tabled, or if you just want to have a really well balanced, rounded out army. We're gonna kind of go into both directions with that. Um,
The
for
idea
this,
is, oh, sorry. The idea is that the meta changes over time. So whatever is really good now might be absolutely dog water next edition, or when you get a codex or whatever.
don't buy it
So
because it's good. Just don't, as a general rule,
yeah,
because it won't be.
the general play style of units tends to be the same through editions, but if you're buying something just because it's good on the tabletop, I think you need to invest in a hobby that is going to cost you way less money in the long run. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, and
Because, yeah,
for the topic of this video, we're going to be using the Astra Militarum as kind of just like our focal points. We can't obviously, tell you how to build every army, but we're going to go kind of into my history building this army because this has been my first 2,000 point army. And it serves as kind of a good middle ground to represent a lot of stuff. So like if we talk about, say, you need like a artillery unit for the Astra Militarum, it's literally just a giant field gun. And that's just going to make kind of it easier to understand, but we will compare it to other comparative models from other armies.
there are a lot of parallels from the Astra Militarum to real world military. Not saying that it's one to one, but it uses very familiar terms like mortar emplacements, field gun, heavy
Command
tank,
staff.
APC, things like that.
Yeah.
All right.
So you're talking. You wanted to go over core rules first.
Yeah, so the first thing you need to do before you even think about what models to collect is, first off, if you're a lorehead and you want a model of a certain character, just go for it. I don't play World Eaters, but I have some World Eaters models. But if you're talking about actually getting an army together, you need to read the core rules for how an army is built. Fortunately, 10th edition is a lot easier than 9th used to be. With 9th used to have a lot of detachments and like battle
Yeah, we've
line
lost a
tax
lot
is
of
what
that
it used to call
stuff.
it. Yeah, that's a whole thing, but now it's pretty simple. According to the core rules of Warhammer 40,000 10th edition, in order to have a valid army list, you need at least one character, and for every other unit, you can take up to 3 of them. And if the character is an epic hero, that being a named character from lore, like in Astra Militarum, Lord Solar Leontis, you can only have one of them because only one of them exists in lore. But for every other unit, you can have 3 of them. So with Astra Militarum, you can have 3 Cadian Castellans, you can have 3 Lehman Russ tanks, whatever. And that's
Yeah.
it. The rules are pretty flexible. So you have a lot of leeway to build your units as you like, as long as you have one character in there somewhere to act as your warlord. And then everything else, go for it.
Yeah. Um, so do you want to go over? Do you want to go like for your very first models? Do we want to cover that first?
Well, before you even pick models, you should probably pick your faction.
Oh yeah, we kind of assume you have a faction in mind, whether
Well,
it's
some
just
people
one.
don't.
No, and that's totally fine. So if you just want to go through like which one you like, that's totally fine. Like for me, I picked guard because I like the idea of humanity united in arms, just as regular guys fighting incredible terrors of the warp. I think that's cool. I like a horde army. I like having a bunch of little men with laser guns that do nothing to orcs.
Yeah, that is completely fair. I have experienced this firsthand. Your las guns don't mean absolute
They
dick.
don't do shit.
If you're
If
playing against
you're,
like sisters or Tyranids, maybe, but or Tau,
yeah,
not
yeah.
now.
But if you're trying to pick your army based on like a style of gameplay you want, that's totally different. We're not gonna go through all the factions, but like guard is gonna be kind of like a mechanized infantry type of army. Vehicles moving up and just a swarm of guardsmen. If you want something more elite, you might do Space Marines or Custodes.
And
Um,
a core part of Asher Militarum gameplay is having characters that kind of buff your regular
yeah,
dudes.
your officers. It's
Yeah.
very classic. Wargaming stuff.
Mm.
Um,
I
or
I find. Oh, go on.
no, no, you're good.
I find that is very much a sort of boomer army in the
It
case
is a
of
boomer army,
if you want your
but it's
classic
okay. I'm
arena.
only 20, so I have a while until the guard, the guard actual like motif sets in of like, oh, this man knows
Listen,
too much about World War II.
yep. As long as when you start wearing Hawaiian shirts, just look back.
Just look back.
No, but you hit a good point of picking aesthetic versus rules. If you have a certain style of, as you said, you pick the guard because it is the everyman, the grassroots. I
The
am doing
red
my
shirts.
part. Yeah, exactly. The red shirts, the stormtroopers, the starship troopers sort of thing. If that is one of the reasons you're going for an army, that is 100% valid, and I find that's more effective than rules. However, if you are going to commit to making an army, you should also see if that aesthetic matches the gameplay you're looking for.
Yes,
Because,
absolutely.
yeah, because generally, no matter what edition it is, the core gameplay identity of the faction tends to be the same on their rules. So, with Astra Militarum, no matter what edition you play, their core rules, which you could find either in their codex or in 10th edition their index, is based on having overwhelming long-range firepower and then using commands or orders to shove infantry up the field after you just mulch the enemy with tanks, artillery, things like that. It is a slow creeping gun line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if you really like Tyranids, for example, and you just love the look of them and whatnot, you think they're really cool from a lore perspective of this angry, hungry bug that wants to devour everything, but you're not so much into, say a horde element of it, that's fine. That army that you're looking at may have other elements to it. Like with Tyranids as a good example, you can have Monster Mash, which is where you do really big models and you
Mm.
don't have to have a bunch. But if you want a horde army, you can't play Custodes. You just can't do a horde army with Custodes. And that might be a deal breaker for you, or it might not be. You might like the faction enough, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, things to look for rules is, as you said, Horde versus Elite. There's a continuum. I like to think of it as a three-axis graph. You have like the X, Y, and Z axis, and depending on where you are in that, it'll tell you kind of what vibe you're looking at for an army. You have
Sure.
the range versus melee, in terms of how you normally do damage, because psychic is no longer a thing. You
No.
have your um, Horde versus Elite. Horde being you're spending a lot of models at once, Elite meaning you're not. And then you have the complex versus straightforward in terms of what your strategy is going to be for most of the game. how many shenanigans you need to pull.
Yeah.
So if you know generally where on that axis you want to try your army, there's usually going to be at least like 4 or 5 factions that kind of fit that.
Yeah, and for the most part, Warhammer, the armies in Warhammer are quite flexible to a certain extent. You can generally, for the most part, play any faction in any type of way if they have enough models. Um,
Yeah, if you're not looking to play competitively, then you have a lot more flexibility. For
sure.
example, orcs have an absolute banger of a codex this edition,
Yeah, yeah.
where
I have
orcs,
another 2 years.
yeah, maybe 3.
11th.
Orcs, yeah, orcs. Their core identity is very rush down melee. They are straightforward. They are going to come at you and they're going to bonk you, and they're going to bonk you a lot of freaking times. And so, however, in their codex, they actually have a set of rules for a very shooty based fast vehicle list. And so, in this case, 10th edition is great, where they gave us rules for trying something that's very different from our normal core aesthetic, which is pretty nice. But in general, if you know the core identity of your army in terms of what its basic playstyle is, no matter what edition you are, if you like that playstyle, you should be able to play for years, no matter what.
Yeah. Um, and actually, real quick before we go into starting to get your first models, you mentioning playing it for years is another good point to this. Warhammer is definitely a investment, not so much of like expecting to get something out of it as in money, but if you're gonna be buying 2,000 points of an army, that is a lot of money. It is a lot of time to paint and build. So do think ahead. Is this something you're gonna want to keep playing forever? It doesn't need to be your sole army, but are you only going to play it for a couple months and then want to change up factions? If so, that's fine. Don't make a 2,000 point army. Do a combat patrol or 1,000 points.
Yeah, we'll get there. Don't buy 2,000 points at once unless you're in
No,
times
don't buy
3.
it. We're going to go into that later. Don't buy 2,000 points at once. You're insane.
Yeah. Oh my god, I have a buddy at the local game store. He has a habit of just slamming down 3,000 points of models and then just keeping them gray. I do
Oh,
not understand that.
I've bought about 1,500 points in a month, so I am in that category.
That's insane to me. For me,
Yes.
it took me, I think, because I bought one kit at a time, where I bought a kit, I
Nope.
built it, painted it, finished it, and then moved on to the next one. I think it took me about like a year and a half to get 2,000 points, but
I built
in
like my
that,
whole army in about a month, so I mean, I
not
got
everyone has
built.
that time, I'm going to be honest.
Oh.
Yeah, I started this hobby. So I started playing over Tabletop Simulator at my old job, but I started actually painting and collecting midway through my first year teaching. So it took me a while over the weekends to just slowly build up my forces. And so that can actually lead us to what models to get first and sort of put this into words.
You're
How
a
to
teacher, you should know
select,
words.
yeah, I'm a science teacher. I know numbers. How to select your first units to build sequentially so that you don't burn out immediately.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue to just start with your first model. Um,
What was your
so,
first model?
what, for my army?
Yeah, that you built up and painted. What was your first unit?
It wasn't a unit. I actually started with a combat patrol.
Okay, that's pretty common. Do you mind explaining what a combat patrol is?
Yeah, so GW has created the combat patrols. They used to be named Start Collecting Boxes. The general idea is they wanted to make a bunch of boxes, generally about 500 points, of a good thematic list of units discounted to get you into the army starting strong. For the most part, they failed at that. Um, for some armies, it's better. For others, it's worse. But it is pretty good in the fact that it's discounted. And if it's models you want and you are going to use in your army, then all the better. So for the Astra Militarum Combat Patrol, You have two squads of Cadian shock troops. Cadian shock troops being your general battle line, which is just your regular guys. You have a command squad, which is like 5 guardsmen who act as a officer unit. Two field ordnance batteries, which is a single unit. It is artillery, and then you have a scout sentinel, which is what would you classify the scout sentinel as? Like just general mechanized,
A scout sentinel is a fast attack scout unit. It
Yeah,
has the same
okay, that
army
works.
role as a recon bike squad or anything that moves fast up the field turn one to do some chip damage and to take early objectives.
Yeah, it's supposed to go up there and pester the enemy.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a scout.
so that's what I started with. And generally, for the most part, I would recommend combat patrols if you know you're going to like the army. Otherwise, just buy a box of your battle line infantry and paint that up and see how you like it first. That way, it's a little bit cheaper and it's not as riskful. For me, though, I knew I wanted to do guard, so it wasn't hard for me to do this.
Dude,
I
your
do
point
what?
about battle line your point about battle line infantry is exactly what I was going to say. That's how I got started. I painted boys first because you put up a very excellent point. Is that the combat patrol is a good discount box. It's still like $160.
It's still expensive.
So if you aren't willing to put down that money right off the bat, we'll get into why combat patrol is so good. But then starting with your basic infantry is a great idea, mainly because it usually the main infantry of a faction hits the sort of core identity of that faction in terms of gameplay and aesthetic, where if you don't like the main infantry of your dudes, that might be a problem for army building because that's going to
Especially
be
for
a
guard.
huge, yeah, it's going to be a big mainstay of what you're going to be building for the next few years.
Yep. But anyways, I had bought the combat patrol. I think let me just go like quickly into my story of how I started my army.
Yeah, dude.
So I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my guard army, but I looked at the combat patrol. I liked the models, and I started building a list around those models. Um, I had gotten the combat patrol. I started to flesh it out, give it some more officers, um, get some heavier weaponry such as like a Lehman Russ and whatnot. But it was very disorganized. Like I had one Scout Sentinel, which is not very optimized because if you put in a unit of 3, stratagems affect it better, and it's just more effective. Um, so a couple months after I'd gotten that, I had started getting into the Minkoles books, and I wanted to build my army off of the 101st Cadian Regiment. So I was absolutely going for purely a aesthetic army, as in not to look good, but I wanted it to match a certain feel in my head. And I think I have a pretty good list for it. It is certainly not super competitive, but I have worked it out to be thematic, be somewhat lore accurate, and have everything I want while still being good enough to where I'm not going to get absolutely stomped.
Having a overall well-rounded force, even if it's not competitive, it's enough where you have at least a solution to each of the main problems you get in a war game. That being, damage output, objective capturing, and tactical flexibility.
Yeah, generally you want to build something pretty balanced. You never really want a slanted list in that unless that's like
When
your
you're starting
thing.
out.
Yeah. Um, because say you want to go all tanks. You're a guard player, you like the tanks. That's fine. You do all tanks and you go up against somebody who just has a overwhelming amount of anti-tank and
Nice.
infantry. You're going to have a lot of problems capturing objectives because tanks generally just are not for that. And then you don't have the models to spare to lose them to anti-tank. So you want to flesh your army out to where it can fill a lot of holes in a lot of different missions.
Mhm. And I think that if you want the aesthetic of the slant list, that's fine. But if Warhammer 40,000 is your first war game, playing a slant list is not going to help you learn the game as well as having something more balanced because you want to be able to learn how each of the different sort of types of units plays, you know? And
Uh,
if you run with just 100% tanks all the time and that's the only list you do, you're not really learning how to play Warhammer. You're learning to play a very specific type
I kill
of
you with
gameplay
my
of
big
Warhammer.
gun.
Yeah, exactly. And if you like, it's
um,
fine. But if you're learning how to play the game in general, I would not suggest doing something slanty like that. And the combat patrol box, oh man. So I have a mixed history with the combat patrol boxes because in ninth, as you said, they were shooting to be 500 points, and they realized they messed up. But many of the combat patrols kind of follow the same theme, where they give you a character, your basic battle line infantry, which were called troops at the time, some type of vehicle, and then some type of special elite thing your army has.
yeah,
Astra
it's
Militar. Oh yeah, Astra Militarum has your command squad as your character, your battle line, which is your normal Canadian shock troops, your vehicle, which is going to be the Scout Sentinel, and then your kind of elite sort of thing, which is your field ordnance battery. And
for the
the orcs have the same thing. Orcs have 20 boys, Warboss Mega Armor, a Death Dread, and a Death Copta. And that's how it was for them in ninth. And then they changed the purpose of Combat Patrol in 10th edition because they realized that you cannot play those boxes against each other and be balanced. Because if they're shooting to put the same amount of plastic in each box, an elite heavy army like Custodes is just going to have more value than something like AdMech. So they changed the balance by making Combat Patrol its own game mode where you run certain units in that box for Combat Patrol and it is balanced differently than the full 40k game. That was a good move. And they
no,
immediately shot themselves in the foot by changing the combat patrols.
it is. I mean, for the most part, combat patrols are nice. It's supposed to give you a very good idea of what your army is. I think for the most part, they kind of get that right. It has a wide range of units, and it generally has like a shiny model of like, oh wow, that thing is awesome, and that's gonna be like your cool piece. You just want to have it. Um, like
The orcs have
what?
the Death Dread, the
Yeah,
Drukhari, the
yeah.
Raider.
Thank you. Um,
The Space
should
Marines have like 10 bajillion different things.
the Space Marine Combat Patrol sucks though because like its big thing is like the Impulsor, which just sucks.
Nowadays the combat patrol has like Terminators and Infernus Marines, so
Oh shit.
it depends
Okay.
on it depends on what box you're getting, and that's a small hang up with what I have for the combat patrols now is that Games Workshop is beginning to take the vehicles out of them. And I find that one of the reasons the Combat Patrol boxes are such a fantastic, like, beginner collector item to get is not only because of the discount that it offers, but also it gives you a perspective on the different types of models you would be painting.
Yeah.
The old Orc Combat Patrol, nowadays it's a Beast Snagger thing, but the old one was so great if it's your first time painting orcs or just painting in general, because it gives you some infantry to practice basic infantry techniques on, getting like clothes and skin and things like that. It has some vehicles like the Death Dread and the Death Coptas to get all the techie bits and nice flat armor panels that are different than some of the organic shapes with the infantry. And then it has like a Warboss and Mega Armor to get big chunky armor plates, and the Death Dread has like the smokestacks to try and do piping and everything. It was a nice varied box of different textures and materials that you could paint to get a well-rounded experience of okay, once I paint this box, I am able to paint most other things because I am used to all these different um, textures and ways to paint
Different
different
aspects
things.
of modeling the hobby.
Yes, and in Asher Militarum, you have the Kenyan shock troops, so you get the basic like sort of khaki and sort of flak armor thing. You also have the Scout Sentinel for those nice sort of vehicle patterns that you could do. You have the Command Squad, which has a few more sort of like helmets, or whatever, and then you have the Bombast Field Guns, which are the Field Ordnance Batteries, whatever they are, that have the basic big cannon thing to try some like gunmetal recipes on and stuff. So by the time you finish that box, you have experience painting 90% of the textures and materials that you will paint in a National Militarum army, no matter what you buy.
Yes. Um, we've been talking about battle line and stuff, and I think we should probably cover the different elements to an army.
Sure.
So in Warhammer, there's only really a couple. You have characters. Characters being your leaders for your units. You have your battle line, which obviously is just your general infantry guys. These are meant to capture points, do objectives. They're not really generally they're not expensive. They're supposed to be used and spent well.
And
And
and usually you can field more of them than other armies. That rule of three
yeah,
I mentioned
you can do
earlier.
like six Cadian shock troop squads
Yeah,
instead
the
of
rule.
three.
Of, yeah, exactly. All armies, their battle line units, their basic troops, you can field more of. But everything else is three, and that incentivizes you. Also because battle line tends to have better objective controlling ability than other units. They are going to be your bread and butter of doing objectives, capturing points, while the rest of your stuff is going to be your damage dealers.
Yep. And then you have your transports. It's pretty self-explanatory. Move your infantry squad up to an objective while remaining somewhat safe.
Mm-hmm.
And
Dedicated
then,
transports in the Astra Militarum are the Chimera. In actual military terms, you would think that as like an APC.
yeah, this is your IFV that's shooting and moving and dropping guys
Mm-hmm.
up right in front of people.
Exactly. It's the
Um,
Bradley.
Now, so I use the Warhammer app for building my army, and they have another category of just other data sheets. This is
Okay,
kind of
let's break that down, I think.
yeah. Well, real quick. So after you get past your transports, this is kind of going into other smaller elements of your army. That like that being like artillery, heavy armor, light armor, just generally different elements that you compare to like a real military force.
Mhm. And in this other datasheet sort of category, different units, at least in 10th edition, now have different keywords like vehicle, mounted, monster, infantry. But I don't find that those keywords really fit the core idea of what some of those units are. Like,
Really?
for instance, in Astra Militarum, the infantry keyword is used for your basic conscripts or like your basic
Hmm.
infantry squad, but it's also used for like Ogren, which has a very different army role than your normal
That's
infantry does. You
fair.
know, I do find that I want to talk about this a little bit. That back in ninth edition, there was a little bit more granularity with different classes of units, where instead of just vehicle being a thing, different vehicles could be fast attack or heavy support or super heavy, and so the old edition of 40k divided units a little bit more based on what their general role in the army was rather than just what type of unit they were. And I think that helped a lot of players build an army to try and get one of those key sort of, classes of units in their collection by the time they start army building.
Yeah. I haven't played ninth, so I'll take your word on it. There are a couple keyword things that are a little bit confusing. Um, I mean, generally though, like, it depends on like what your army looks like. For guard, it's pretty easy to tell what a unit does. If it's a tank, it's a tank. It looks like a tank. But for Tyranids, it's a little bit different because they're all bugs. Um, so I get how that can be confusing. Nick, I got a question for you real quick.
Yeah, man.
You have like how many points of orcs do you have?
4,900.
Okay, so good.
I have
So
a
you
lot.
I assume you have. Do you have an army list that is primarily like just meant to be well balanced?
Yeah.
Okay.
Warhorde is a detachment. It's the classic orcs like to do melee, so I have a lot of melee units in there, but I have some range stuff, and it hits the major parts of it without being a meta sweat where I only take the good things. It's what I call my smorgasbord, where I played a lot against new players where it fits the general theme of orcs, but at the same time, it has one of every sort of vibe. So by the time you finish, you know generally what each class and unit does. Yeah.
Cool. So, do you want to do this? So, like I said before, my army is very much a aesthetic, lore-based army. Do you want to do this as in I can go over my army list and why I chose that, and you can do yours in the kind of opposite of I chose this because it fills this role?
Sure, absolutely. Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, and while he does that, army building apps. There is what's the free one?
Oh, new recruit. It's so good,
Is it?
dude.
Anyways, there are a
Oh, there's
couple
also Battle
apps.
Scribe. Battle
Battle
Scribe is easier to
Scribe.
play.
I was talking
Yep.
about Battle Scribe. Yeah. There are a couple apps you can use. I use the Warhammer app. You do have to pay a subscription for it, but it's pretty nice. It gets updated pretty quick, which can Battle Scribe can be a little bit weird because while everybody tries to get the Battle Scribe updates out quick, you have to manually update it. So I might miss that there's been a points change to stuff. But I do like the Warhammer app. That's what I'm using for this video and for my personal army.
Absolutely. Well,
Uh,
in that case, let's see. Battlescribe is good for if you're playing over Tabletop Simulator because that is paired with a mod called Yellow Scribe on Steam. So if you want to, that's how I got started playing the game. Before I owned a lot of models, I played over Tabletop Sim to kind of test what kind of models I would want to actually pick up. Where I got the ones that I liked for the aesthetic first, but then later, when I started actually army building, I tested them over TTS first, which I think really,
That's
really
pretty
helped.
neat.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
So I guess we'll go over my list first.
Go for it, dude.
Okay, so my list, like I said before, is of the 101st Cadian Regiment. So to break it down, a regiment is it's your larger formation of an army. It's generally like comparatively in the real military, it'd be like a unit. It would be like the 101st Airborne. Is it the 101st? Or did I just totally get that wrong?
I know shit dick about U.S. military, bro. I cannot
Hang
tell
on.
you.
Hang on. What is the airborne unit? Because if I 82nd, I was thinking of something way different. I'll try to cut that out. Anyways, um, so it this would be comparative to your units. So in the book, it solely focuses on this regiment. So with that being said, I'm trying to get just Cadians. I'm trying to paint them all the same. They're all from the same units and whatnot. So that has limited me, and I don't have any Krieg models. I don't have any what is the Artillery? The Rough Riders. I don't have any
Attila Rough
other.
Riders, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any other units like that. But I went through the books and I tried to get this to fit the characters, the composition of like a regiment in Warhammer, while being still functional. So what I did is I picked the characters that I wanted, that being like Minka Lesk, her command squad, a commander of a for the White Shields, that being Major Luca, a commissar, um, and a squad leader, and an infantry squad. Um, so I'm just going to go off on my characters first. So I have Acadian Castell, and that's just a basic officer. That is, I chose that just to fit this one character. I want this to be Major Luca. I have a Acadian Command Squad. That is going to be my command squad for just my infantry. So like I couldn't do a full regiment because that would be way too many points. So I had to narrow it down. I chose Minka's company, which is 7th Company, and inside of 7th Company, I chose, I think, like the 1st Squad, just because I cannot have that many models.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Commissar. That's obviously going to be my Commissar from the book. I have Gaunt's Ghost. I am using that as a proxy for Minka Lesk and her company command squad. So they're a little bit stronger than a normal command squad, and you can run them as like their own unit, and they don't need to lead anything. I did pick Lord Solar. For anybody that doesn't know, Lord Solar is a really good model for the Astra Militarum. He gives like 3 orders and he generates CP, so he's for the most part an auto include just because he's really good. But I am proxying him as my regimental command staff of like the Lord General Benedict and his guys. I got a Psyker from the book, and then I have a tank commander. We're going to leave the tank commander part for now. We'll come back to that later. So that's all my characters. It's generally, I would like to think, pretty well balanced. Obviously, I don't need the Commissar. The Commissar in 10th edition isn't really effective all that much. But with having this amount of characters, it gives me a lot of orders to play with, and it feels what I want out of my characters. Do you have any comments on my characters so far?
No, I think it's a very, what we call a fluffy list, where you also have a couple synergies where you see that, if you want Minka to sort of be proxied in as a leader, you obviously want her to have a squad that actually does something. And so I think you're hitting a little bit of what kind of synergies that you want, where some of the characters, you could say, exist in a vacuum where you just bring them because they kind of fit the aesthetic. But I think you've also considered how you can actually make them work, where how can you give them a unit that really makes them shine as to what their rules are, or what their role in the army is. So
yeah,
a commissar,
that's kind of what I was trying to go for.
Yeah, so like a commissar, you want them to order some infantry around to like stay firm and be there. A tank commander, you want to support, other
other
heavy artillery
vehicles, and I have that, and we'll go into that when I get down further on the list.
Yeah.
But cool. So moving on, I have a lot of infantry. This doesn't necessarily come from the book, although the book is primarily infantry based. I wanted a horde army for the most part. So are you ready? Because I don't think you've really seen my list.
That is correct, but then again, I am not scared of horde armies. I am known to be a green tide enjoyer.
Good. We are starting with 6 squads of Cadian shock troops.
20 each.
So that is 60 men. I
10 each.
Yeah, 10 each.
Okay.
And
Okay,
60, right?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, no, sorry. I have 5.
Run?
1 second. I have 5 Cadian shock troop squads. I'm sorry.
Okay, can they be run squads of 20?
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So I went by a picture I saw just on Google of how Warhammer breaks down their armies. So for a company, I think they have like 3 infantry squads, and each infantry squad is, I'm just going to say it's like 50 guys. And then they have another element of either heavy weapon squads and stuff like that, but they had numbers included for those, and I wasn't able to meet the heavy squad requirements because we can only do 3 of each unit. So to fill around that, I also have 3 more squads of infantry squads. So real quick for you guys, Cadian shock troops, they have the ability where it's just for like taking objectives. Infantry squads are a little bit different. So they can take some other like heavy weapon elements, and they get benefit of cover on a objective. So my shock troops are functioning as, my infantry for taking objectives. They're going to be led by my Cadian command squad, which is going to be that squad's command staff and the lieutenant leading them. My infantry squads, those are going to be white shields. So I couldn't do conscripts because that's no longer a thing. But these guys I'm using kind of more as infantry than the other infantry. I have these guys with the idea I am going to use these to throw an objective even if I can't take it, but it's going to slow the enemy down. And I will lead them with my Commissar and Major Lucas so they can still take orders, and they have the Commissar for battle shock, and obviously a Commissar would lead white shields. So that's all I have for battle line. And for the most part, they're just las guns. This is more so just to make things easier for me. But if I wanted to, I could swap them out with some special weapons just to give them a wider range for stuff they can handle. But what do you think on that?
So who did you say you were going to run as the white shields?
The infantry squads. I have 3, so it would be 30 men.
Gotcha. And what is their purpose versus the Cadian shock troops? Because that's a lot of infantry. Do you have a different way to run them in terms of which ones are going to be the damages, which ones are going to be taking objectives? Because that is 8 squads of basically just infantry.
It is a lot of infantry, and they're basically all the same. So it's a lot of over redundancy, and I get that. So my Cadian shock troops are kind of going to form as like a screen. They're going to make my battle line in basically a literal sense. Of just kind of swarming the board, whereas my infantry squad, say I see a backfield objective, I'm going to push these guys. Even if I can't get it, I'm fine with losing 3 infantry squads that take it. So a lot of over redundancy, and this is the problem where you get where if you're trying to do like an aesthetic army, I had to do this kind of just to fit what I wanted and what I was going by. For most people, you wouldn't take this much infantry. This is 480 points of infantry, which is a lot. It is a lot.
That's a quarter of a 2,000 point list.
So, real quick, what do you see that's missing out of this? Like, what's your biggest concern so far?
Okay, so first of
all, other than a lot of infantry.
First of all, in terms of like gameplay things, do you have any units that are going to be in reserved or saved for later to take corner objectives or basically be action monkeys?
Yes.
That's going to be pretty important.
Yeah, I do have kind of another unit for getting around and just doing, I need to go here now kind of objective.
Yeah, these are your jump pack dudes, your assassins. Basically, do you have someone that can just kind of be in a corner turn 3 doing investigate signals or something?
So Gaunt's Ghosts, Minka and her command squad, excuse me, they're pretty good with getting around the board. They have Infiltrator, they have
does Gaunt's Ghost have stealth?
Yeah, they do have stealth, so they can't be engaged outside 12 inches. So
that is what lone op is. That's different than stealth.
Not stealth. Hang on.
Do they have lone operative? Because that's really nice.
Yeah, actually no, I do have. Okay, so Gaunt's Ghost. Gaunt's Ghost is my Minka, Lesk, and her command staff, and in the book they basically do random bullshit. So they have fights first. They have infiltrators, lone operative, and stealth.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so they can get around the board quite easily without being held up by other enemies.
Okay, great.
but they only have 6 inches of movements. So I do have a Chimera, which is Minka's personal Chimera from the book, dedicated for them.
Okay, fair. Putting them in strategic reserves might also help keep them safe because then they can show up turn 2 wherever they need to be.
And that too.
Because the Chimera just makes them a big target now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the Chimera is not so much like it's gonna be with them, but it can go over to them if it needs to. And then I have just another Chimera, which is just it's gonna move some guys if it needs to. Obviously, it cannot take 480 points of infantry across the board, but it will work as getting some of them further up and still doing a decent bit of damage and taking a decent bit of damage.
Right, and you have plenty of infantry to be back point holders, just having some, like, cheap piss shitters, basically, to just stand on the backfield.
Yeah.
And just, do you have, and you have plenty of backline fire support.
Yeah,
do you
we'll
have
go into my
any,
backline stuff, too.
Yeah, do you have any center field trade pieces? Things that, like, I don't know if every armor has trade pieces, but do you have something that can go on the midfield, take a beating, and hopefully take that center objective?
Yeah, so obviously I was missing a lot of heavy firepower.
Yes.
With Minka's company, it's all infantry, so I knew I had to branch out. So what I did is there's another character, which is Colonel Sparka, who is from 8th Company, so same regiment. But that company is an armored company. So I have I have the first squad of the 8th Company, which is 3 Lehman Russes, led by the commander tank, which is obviously my tank commander.
What type of Lehman Russ? Just battle cannon?
So Colonel Sparka's tank is a demolisher. That's more so because I have to spend 200 points anyways. I might as well take the biggest gun.
I love the demolisher, dude.
And it does fuck.
It's not the Vanquisher when it comes to Titan killing, but the Demolisher is so cool. It's the Chode cannon.
It's the Chode cannon. And on him, I have 2 multi-meltas. So he's gonna be. I assumed he would be very up close and personal, and to kind of counterbalance the multi-meltas, he also has a flamer if he gets swamped with infantry.
Dope.
And then I have 2 Lehman Russ Vanquishers. This is for shooting my really big, heavy armored targets. They're not the best, but they are cheap, so it left me extra points for other stuff. They have heavy bolters and las cannons to just give them extra firepower and to give them the furthest amount of range. And then I have a Lehman Russ Exterminator, which is kind of be in the middle between those two. I picked that because its ability gives AP to whatever it's shot at. Everybody else will get AP.
Do you have any backline artillery as part of this?
I do.
Fantastic.
You are going... This is... Okay, the podcast is going to stop because we're going to have a fight because you're going to be like, why the fuck did you pick that? Are you ready for my backline artillery?
Is it not the Basilisk?
It is not the Basilisk.
You're a fucking troglodyte.
I know. It's even worse.
Right, what do you got?
It's even worse. You're going to be like, that's not artillery.
What do you got?
So in the books, there is no real artillery, and I had to choose something that would be in the regiment.
Yeah.
The regiment does have Hydras.
Yeah, okay.
Well, hang on.
Anti-air. All right.
So here we go. The Hydra's only 85 points, so I have 2 of them. Okay. They have, and this is where it kind of gets interesting. They have the autocannon, which has 72 inches of range, so they can reach across the board. Mm-hmm. And it's still 4 autocannons. So this would be like having a heavy weapons squad that could reach across the board.
Okay. So here, I don't want to get too far into meta things. Those are an anti-flyer gun that shoots flak.
Well, here's the thing.
Oh yeah.
It's still an autocannon. It's still strength 9, AP
it's still
1,
yeah.
And it's still 4 shots each. So that's 8 shots, and they all have 3 damage per shot.
Problem. Indirect fire? Question mark.
No.
All right, that's understandable. That is not as bad of a choice as I was expecting. I'm gonna be completely honest.
No.
I thought you were gonna be like, oh yeah, I have 2 Death Strike missiles.
Yes. So if I target here and you need to move here, there's already another marker, and now I'm gonna do 2 mortal wounds, and that's it. Actually, they're not even mortal wounds.
Yeah. Okay. No, the Hydra's fair. I mean, if you were being a meta sweat, you would just do 3 Basilisks and then 3 Manticores.
Yeah.
But
and also
yeah, no, Hydra's cool. It's cool.
also both of these Hydras have a hunter killer missile. All of the Lehman Russes have hunter killers, and the Chimeras all have hunter killers.
That's kind of silly.
Yeah, so
You
I have
know?
I think like 9 hunter killer missiles.
You know, I'm not kicking you out of the kitchen, but
Okay.
it's coming out a little dry. That's
But
all
you're
I'm saying.
starting
But
to
yeah,
take
no,
away some of my
good.
ingredients because you don't think I can. I get
am
it.
nowhere near. Yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah.
to quickly wrap this up because I know I'm taking a lot of time.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
very
yeah.
last unit is a squad of Kasserkin. This is just my elite infantry to
Based!
protect Lord Solar and to
Based!
just kind of do a little bit more firepower than just regular infantry squads.
God, the Kasserkin is so cool.
And that's about it. That's my whole 2,000 point army.
Dude, okay, listen, man. I love Kasserkin as a concept. They're just
120
large,
points
but
is too
better.
expensive.
They
Yeah.
they are not too expensive, homie. They do a lot. They have 2 orders.
They do.
God.
And
What they are-
mines and shit.
They fill the hole that Tempestus Scions left in my heart by being bad. So now the Kasserkin just fill that role, but better. You know?
And it's good for them to protect Lord Solar, which is my Lord General, because they can give themselves orders. He doesn't have to use an order on them.
Yeah, exactly. And, he has, like, the
And this
whole
this is a good part about your army. When you're building, don't just pick models because they fill this aspect of your army. Also look at their abilities and see what they work well with. Like I have a lot of infantry, which is good and whatnot, but they're not going to do much damage to tanks. But with the Exterminator, that's -1 AP. So now every single one of my las guns, say you had like a knight, I shoot it once with the Exterminator, and now I have like 100 las guns that have AP1.
And if you stay still, you have lethal hits. Yeah.
And I have lethal hits, so it starts stacking up.
Yeah, finding those synergies is very important. Also, in 10th edition, you have to consider your leaders. You've made it very intentional that each of your leaders has a squad that they can attach to. You don't have the old Orc Combat Patrol issue where you have boys and a Warboss and Mega Armor, which used to be able to run together, and now in 10th they can't, because 10th edition has this thing where certain character models can only
lead certain units.
Yeah, certain units. So you have to know what's going to lead what. So just keep that in mind as well. But it seems like you've already accounted for that, which is great.
Yeah, and so as a guard player, every army functions different. So for guard, they need a lot of officers because a infantry squad without an officer or an order under it is not going to do much. So you have to keep your core, identity in mind. Like other units or other armies, leaders aren't as important. They still definitely are important, but they're especially important for guard, and they're made cheap enough so you can get a bunch. So with my current army, I have a lot of orders, and I have enough orders to give them to every infantry squad and to all my tanks as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all for my army. That was just to kind of show you where, if you want to do a aesthetic lore army or what you want, it can give you some issues. This took away so many options. Like, I have a Baneblade. I like to use my Baneblade, and I'll probably use it because it's from a different army and a larger army group, so I can make it work lore-wise. But I can't take it because then I can't take a lot of other stuff, and it doesn't work for me.
And then there's all the specialized Chimera chassis tanks, like the Hellhound and everything like that. That are cool.
And those aren't
You just
even
can't
books,
do.
so I don't want to take them. So
Exactly.
that's something to keep in mind. I've been able to make it work, but for other people, it's going to be harder, or it might be easier. Anyways, enough about Guard and me and my army. Nick, give us a good idea on what a nice, well balanced army can look like.
All right, so this is not the optimal orc list because if you're playing orcs optimally in Warhorde, you're running almost exclusively melee units. I try not to do that because that is really committing to one playstyle, which is valid, but I'd like to take a smattering, and I actually included a list where you should be able to run everything you get from the old Orc Combat Patrol, which is cool.
Sweet.
Also, spoiler, I am not really a Beast Naga enjoyer, so I don't have any Squig Hogs or Mozrog or anything, because that is not really my aesthetic, but I do have some Beast Naga boys, but I don't
It's
have
okay
any, like...
if you're raging in the comments. I have fought with him in one before.
I'm not a Squig enjoyer!
I respect his opinion, but I also respectfully disagree.
Listen, I'm not a huge
I know you like
you
like the Junkyard Mad Max. That's totally fine, totally fair. I'm sorry, I just love Squigs too much to let it slide.
Yeah, I know, man. Dude, my main list that I've been running, like, in terms of, like, semi-competitively is actually, like, Cult of Speed detachment. But, yeah, here's what I got. So, in terms of what this list is, I have the different vibes of the basic characters that you're going to get in most Orc armies, and some particular combos that have shown up in 10th edition. So, what I've done is I have at least 2 of the different types of old 9th edition army rolls from back in the day. That being HQ, troops, elites, dedicated transports, heavy support, fast attack. And I believe that's it. And I also have the different idea of what the different army rolls are. So, first of all, in terms of characters, I have a war boss, which is the most generic orc character you're ever going to see. And he is going to lead 20 boys. Because boys are your basic infantry, they're OC2, they are your workhorses for just doing damage. Are they as damage efficient as snobs? Maybe not particularly, but it is the classic. You know, and I actually started painting boys as my first ever orc kit, so of course I'm going to have some boys. I have a war boss in Mega Armor, which is another character. He's my warlord. He is my character Ugrok Deathhead. I got him in the Combat Patrol box, and I love him very much. I have a mech, and you're going to find out what he does later, and a beast boss. The vibes for these characters is that the war boss is a big brick shithouse damage dealer that is going to be behind 20 bodies of boys, and their job is to go into the midfield objective, kill anything that moves, and hopefully push further up the field. The war boss of Mega Armor is going to be leading some chunkier infantry to mainly stay on a point for a little bit longer and take on harder targets like tanks. The beast boss is also going to have that sort of role, where the beast boss is going to also be a brick shithouse taking out tanks. So one character is going to be just a general melee unit. 2 of them are going to be tank killers, sort of, because I don't have a lot of like big anti-tank guns. And my mech is going to be support for range stuff. In terms of battle line, I've got a squad of 20 boys and a squad of Beast Naga boys, because the Beast Naga boys are going to be there to give ablative wounds to my Beast Boss, and the 20 boys are there to be with my War Boss. And I have 3 trucks! I love trucks! They are so cool. They are just... Okay, so you mentioned the IFV, the infantry fighting vehicle for you. It's the Chimera, right?
It's the Chimera, and trucks are cool.
Yeah, for the Chimera, it's got some armor. It's like a 3-up save. It has a lasgun array to, you know, protect your infantry. And somewhat fast. The Orc truck is a pickup with a 50 cal machine gun duct tape to it.
Yes,
it is
much better.
Orc vehicles are dirt cheap. The truck is 65 points.
Oh, are they cheap? Because my Chimera is 70.
Mine is 5 points less, but it has firing deck, and we'll get to that.
Firing deck is cool, but I do have lasgun array, but continue.
That is true. Listen, infantry, see, we both have the thing where we both have dirt cheap vehicles, considering.
We're poor.
Yeah, except you have actual tanks. I don't have, like, you know, tanks. Yeah. I have a battle wagon. Oh, speaking of battle wagon, 160 points. Fits 20 dudes in it, covered in guns. That's where Warboss is going to be hanging out. you will notice that each of those infantry squads actually has a transport, because none of my infantry has good armor except for the Mega Knobs.
Yeah,
The
so
rest of them are going to get shot off the board immediately. So I
so real
brought a
quick,
transport for everyone. Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. As a good comparison between like the well balanced and mine, I have a lot of infantry, but I do not have enough transports for nearly all of them. And that gives me the problem of a lot of my guys are gonna get lost before they even get to the battle, which isn't a deal breaker because I have enough to spare and I can also use reinforcement stratagems to get them back. But it's something to keep in mind. His is very well accounted for.
Yeah, also because orc boys have 6 inches of movement, and unless you're using a weird boy with the jump, it's not going to be able to get into the enemy's face. However, if you have trucks and battle wagon, oh excuse me, fuck. If you have trucks and battle wagons, you're able to spend your first turn rocketing up the board with your big melee hitters. So turn 2, you press the wall button, and then all hell breaks loose. Because the orc's job is to get into position and then put all of their melee pressure on at the same time. That is the aesthetic. That is the Goth way of doing things.
And if you're
So,
not familiar with the orcs, their core role, that's the wall, right? That's your core army
yes.
role. It's the wall, so basically it is, once a turn or one phase out of the battle, they just get a very strong buff. So that's for his army role.
It lasts for one battle round. And for the reference, Warhammer games are played out of 5 battle rounds. So for 1/5 of the game, I am juiced up on freaking fungus roids.
Yeah, he'll kill half of my models in one round.
Because I choose when I do it so that I'm in position to charge with everything. But if I'm too far away, it's not going to work. So I need to get my army up the midfield really quickly. And normally, if you're, let's say, a meta orc player, you use Squighogs for this, which is really, really good. And of course, knobs and trucks. I just like having boys and trucks. I have one truck full of Beast Dagger boys, one truck with my mega knobs in it to deposit onto the field, just to make them safe, even safer than they normally are. And then I have a battle wagon full of 20 dudes. And then my third truck, I have flash gets in. Now we get into how orc range armies work. Because I have my melee dudes that either punch up really well or just have a bunch of attacks. I haven't gotten into orc range gameplay. Orc range gameplay is you are not going to be accurate. You hit 1/3 of your shots. So you make up for it by rolling 20 dice at once and hoping that if 1/3 of them hit, that's going to be like 7 hits.
I am a
Pretty
guard
good.
player and I support this message.
Exactly. So my flash gits are an infantry squad. Back in 9th edition, I think they were either heavy support or elites. I think they were heavy support. They have big guns, and I just put them in a truck, and I make them shoot out of the truck with a mech to boost them, so they hit on 4s, and they just slap. They just slap nuts. So they are I plant them near an objective, and use them to take out enemies that I know are going to charge me. They are my counter-charge insurance, basically. In terms of things that aren't meant to necessarily do damage, in terms of elites, I have commandos and meganobs. Meganobs are my damage dealers. Commandos are my infiltrator units. They're there to cap objectives really early, to harass enemies, and basically be a midpoint nuisance for the enemy to draw their fire to while the rest of my army comes up the board. I also have a squad of Gretchen. Gretchen are just goblins. They are my back point holders. No matter what army you have, you want to have at least one cheap unit holding your back point objective in case that's going to be important later in the game. For me, it's my Gretchen. For you, it's basic infantry. Versus the battle, it's crusaders. Everyone has their back point holders. In terms of armor, my battle wagon's a piece of armor. I have a Death Dread, which is the equivalent of Space Marine Dreadnought. It is a heavy mech that is mostly based on melee, obviously, because orcs. It has a 2-up save, toughness 9. It is I ain't going to run it up the board, and you either deal with it, or you're going to get scragged.
Did you say a
And
2-up?
2-up armor save,
God
toughness
damn.
9. It only has 8 wounds, so it does,
Okay,
get
okay.
killed by a Lehman Rust, but I just put in strategic reserves, so that turn 2 it just shows up in your walls, and then you have to deal with it.
The orc dread right behind your Lehman Russ in melee range.
Exactly. Yeah, and so that's one flavor of heavy support, is a heavily armored thing to come up the board. The other flavor of heavy support is mech guns, or artillery. And I have 2 mech guns. And they are going to be on my back point with my Gretchen to help take out any threats that might come near them, and just do some anti-infantry fire, just, out of the wazoo. Fast attack. I have a custom boosted Blasta and a couple war bikes. Turn 1, they're going to be capping some objectives or moving around the board. Some of them might be in reserves, but most of them are going to be running around doing some range damage. I also have a squad of Storm Boys and Defcoptas. They are going to be in the sky, coming in from reserves later. A core part of Warhammer gameplay is having units in reserve to come in later through Deep Strike. That is something I have with Storm Boys and Defcoptas that both have a different aesthetic. The Defcoptas were in the Combat Patrol box, the Storm Boys I just got later. They both kind of fill that role of fast attack a bit. And I think that is everything in my list. So I have my infantry to bully you in the midfield. I have fast attack to help do objectives and deep strike. I have grots and mech guns for backpoint holders. I have flash gates and a death dread for countercharge insurance. And I have transports for everything to make sure they're all safe. It's a nice smattering of orky goodness. Some range, some ramshackle vehicles, some infantry on foot. A nice sort of, I'd say, smorgasbord of orky goodness.
Yeah, it's very multi-purpose. It's gonna do a little bit of everything.
Yes, and that is not how meta people play, where they want to do a lot of one thing and really commit to that strategy. This
That's
is
a
more of,
whole different topic.
yeah, exactly. This is more of, I like being able to hit things, so I have units that will hit things, but I also don't want to be hit too hard, so I have units to prevent myself from being hit too hard.
Perfectly
Um,
fine, perfectly
yep,
well made list. Not perfect. I'm not gonna say it's perfect.
it's
No
not
army
perfectly
list
well
is
made.
perfect. Everything changes, but
This is not,
it's.
yeah.
I mean it's perfect as in like it's good and it's not gonna leave you in any situations or like shit. I have nothing to handle that.
I have a purpose for each unit. They each have a role to play in my army. I'm not going to have some squad dick around doing nothing for half the game. They each have something to do.
Yeah, and it's very possible for me to have an infantry squad that literally doesn't see combat.
Yeah. So that's what I got there. If you guys, okay, I don't mean to shill another podcast, but if you want a better
Oh no,
idea
show
for,
your podcast. I showed on the first episode.
oh yeah, that's
I
fair.
know what you, I know
Or
who you're about to talk about.
yeah, exactly. So if you want a better idea of how to competitively build a list that focuses on these synergies, Poor Hammer has an absolutely excellent episode on the different army roles to have. I naturally found a lot of those roles organically, just kind of reading the rules and figuring out through trial and error. They put it into words so you don't have to do that trial and error period like I did, where I had 20 boys with shootas walking without protection towards the enemy and got surprised that I lost. You
Yeah.
know?
And that's kind of why we didn't focus too much on like, building up your army. We'll go into that in just a second, but we're not going to come close to anything that video did. That was a very well executed video and helped me a lot. Um, but we did want to give you some ideas on, how you want to build your army, why you're wanting to build this way, and some things to keep in mind of to stay away from or to get more of, and make it to where you can still have fun and you're not going to get crushed.
Yep, exactly. I have found that this list is great for playing against newer players, and once newer players learn what each sort of thing in my army does, and they learn how to counter it, and they win, it feels so great, because then they feel competent enough to recognize some
I'm
of
gonna go
those
to a
same
tournament.
roles. Well, okay, listen, man, don't go that far.
No, I
But
know.
it's the thing where they see those roles in other armies. Like, if they play Sisters of Battle, they're like, oh, those Retributors are like Flash Gits, so I don't want to charge them because they might overwatch me or something. Or let's say I want to shoot them first and then close in because they're a big firepower. Or, oh, that Exorcist is like the mech guns. It's going to stay in the backfield and shoot me from afar, so I got to find a way to deal with that. And so it's good to have the basic points that most armies have, because you'll find that no matter whether you're playing Astra Militarum or Space Marines, or whether you're playing Tyranids or Necrons, most armies tend to have the same basic roles, unless your
Yeah,
world leaders are Votann, in which case,
get
Games
fucked.
Workshop says eat shit and die, I guess.
Yeah. And on that topic, like as a good example, Lehman Russ. That is my general purpose main battle tank. For Tyranids, it's a Carnifex. For him, it's what, your battle wagon?
Uh, Battle Wagon's less range support, but I guess you could say the kill tank, but yeah, I guess our
Okay, better
equivalent of
example for
I guess
the
honestly,
Space
like a
Marines, it'd be like a Gladiator.
yeah, that's a better idea. We don't really have a main battle tank. That's not really our thing. But
No.
yes, I guess a battle wagon could kind of be a thing. But yeah, the Gladiator Reaper for Space Marines, the Tyranid back in the day when they had Stonecrusher Carnifex, that was definitely a thing. Necrons, the Doomsday Ark or something. Um,
Tau, this
for
would be like a
Admech,
Riptide, maybe.
yeah, for Admech it's the Onager Doomcrawler, or I guess maybe the Dune Strider, depending on which one you're looking at. If for like an APC, but it'd be the Onager Doomcrawler for you guys, I think. There's a lot of.
Stop being weird, Admech.
Oh yeah,
Get your
dude. You have
get
just
your get your army fixed.
yeah, you have a gun on legs, dude. Oh, okay. Tangent. Have you seen the new Horse Heresy Admech stuff?
Yes.
Oh
It's
my
so
god.
good. Have you seen the new Gene Stealer?
Oh, dude, they're so gnarly.
I
Oh,
love him
man.
and his big old silly meme brain.
They're so good. I also like I like the new Gene Stealers from the Necromunda stuff that have like the boils and like growths on
Yes,
them.
yes.
Oh man, dude, the absolute banger models. Some of that Admech stuff. I'm gonna grab some of those Thalax models and maybe the Castellax. I'm making them into Mechanobs.
Do
Maybe
it.
I'll turn that Castellax into like a Gorkonaut or something, dude. It's so
Absolutely.
awesome.
I'm here for it.
I love
Um,
grabbing things from Necromunda and just making them mine.
check out our episode on kit bashing, where we reference getting models from other armies or other games from Games Workshop. Check out that video. Link in the description.
Oh my god, that was smooth. Holy
Thank
shit.
you. I'm gonna practice my shilling. Maybe we'll be popular enough to where my shilling actually matters.
Woo!
Woo!
No. Alright, well,
Okay.
hey, I think we've hit some of the basic points of like how to figure out what models you want to collect first, some of the options you have, and basic lists from both an aesthetic and a functional side. Are there any other points for
There's one last thing I want
building?
to point out.
Yeah.
So we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. Warhammer is very expensive. It's gonna take you a while.
Yeah.
Don't go for 2,000 points.
Start playing at 1,000, dude. It's so
So
fun.
if you want to build a list for 2,000, that's fine, and that will actually give you a good idea for your end game. So you are continuously working up, and you're not going to have any models left out of your 2,000 point list that you might have had at your 1,000 point list.
It's a Christmas
But
list.
be able to break it up into 1,000 or even 500 points if you can only have a 500 point army so far. Also, it helps if you can get models from other people, eBay, Marketplace, whatever, Discord. But try to work up in those 500 increments. You can absolutely play a game at 500 points. I've done it before with my Black Templars. 1,000 point list is it's enough models to where you can start experimenting with getting maybe a little bit more of a specialized unit Um,
I have 1,000 point lists for some of the more specialized things. Like, cause my main aesthetic is the goths being like, foot slogging dudes smacking you. But I have 1,000 point lists for the more specialized things like cult of speed and stuff because it's nice to test out a well-rounded army identity while not being limited to only 500 points.
oh yeah, sure. But what I meant so much is like at 500 points, you need to get your core essentials. You need your leader, your battle line, some anti-tank, and something to take a punch.
Okay,
But
so you're thinking like 1,000 points gives you room to experiment.
1,000 points, you can flesh that aspect out more, but then you might have enough points to get artillery or maybe like a special elite infantry. It gives you a little bit more room to play with.
Mm-mm. See,
And then after that point, just get up to 2,000 points, and you'll have a full army. Um, One last thing, you covered it. Um, don't buy things because they're good. Don't go solely for I want a very well balanced army. Get what you want. If you don't like it, you're not gonna build it, you're not gonna paint it, and you're not gonna play with it. If you play Custodes and you like the Telemon, get the Telemon. Even if it's so expensive, get it. You like it, you love it, you're gonna use it.
fuck squigs, dude. All my homies hate squigs. I run war bikes.
For me, I bought a Bane Blade. I had to. It's too much fun to not have one.
It's so cool.
It's so
There's so
cool.
much DACA.
It's so cool. As an orc fan, you can't appreciate the DACA.
Oh hell yeah! It's
I
so
I actually
dumb.
added up. I have more than 11 barrels of hell.
Oh damn, that's awesome.
I have like
Let's go.
15.
Oh,
Anyways,
if you need motivation to slowly build up your models, if any of your local game stores have an escalation league, it's basically a monthly thing where you play a game every month, and every month you go up basically by 100 points, so that by the
oh,
end of
that's
the
fun.
year, yeah, so by the end of the year you have a good like, well, I think you started like 500, and so like by the end of the year you basically have 2,000 points, and
Actually, shit, I might have to do that. That would definitely motivate me.
yeah, the Mighty Meeple has a escalation league going on
Okay, sweet.
for Warhammer, and I think that Games Workshop, like our local one, has an escalation league for Age of Sigmar. If you want to get into that,
Gross. No,
yeah, man,
I'm not dissing Age of Sigmar, but it's not my thing.
that's understandable. Fourth edition's coming out. I'm waiting to see the rules because I've been interested. I tried it out. It's cool. However,
I do like the
I
Skaven.
like DACA. Oh, dude, I love Skaven. Skaven was my first Age of Sigmar army that I tried out over Tabletop Sim. The new Skaven look good. However, Flesh Eater Quartz, there's something about it.
I
I like
understand
the.
nothing you're saying.
It's fine, dude.
Um,
Maybe one day we could talk about AOS, but I don't think we will. It's
is
so
there
cool.
any last things you want to cover or tell our viewers to in the aspect of just building up your first Warhammer army?
I mean, shit, dog, take your time. It took me a year and a half to get 2,000 points, and so I just played games over TTS, played 500 point games, played 1,000 point games before that, and that don't rush. If your buddies are like, we are going to a tournament and we're going to play 2,000 point games. If you don't have 2,000 points, don't bother playing. You'll find someone else to play with in the meantime.
Yeah,
Just take your
it's a
time,
little messed up.
and if you need accountability to get shit done, then see if there's an escalation. I believe in you. You can do it.
Okay, well, cool deal. I think that kind of covers everything. Um, yeah, I think that's it. Again, if you want to learn more about like what models to get, check out the Poor Hammer army building episode. Very, very good recommendation. I cannot stress that Poor Hammer is good enough. Like it, they're
They're
amazing.
they're a lot better than us. But hey, we're just some
Please acknowledge
pish.
me, Poor Hammer.
Yeah,
Please, I
listen, man,
love you. I love
we're
you.
just
Please.
yeah, we're just some pish shitters who
Why aren't you
don't.
responding to my text?
Yeah, we're just some pish shitters who don't do this for money. And so we're just like, hey, we're somewhat new. We want to get people into this hobby because we love it. And even though we have a love-hate relationship with Games Workshop, the
It's a very
people,
abusive relationship.
yeah, I don't know about you. The people I've met through this hobby are just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I love the hobby. I love the people. It's nothing but good. Well, no, it's not. But
So okay, let's end it there.
let's end it there. Goodbye. Check out our other videos if you want. Hopefully this has helped. If it has, or if there's anything you disagree with, feel free to leave it in the comments. I have no problem with you guys disagreeing, and it would only do good by giving other viewpoints.
Leave your own piece of advice, man.
Yeah. But that's all. Thank you guys for watching, and good luck with your armies. Goodbye.